From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
All right, welcome back. This is the Dewey Pod Monster. This is your weekly podcast about consumption. We talk to you about movies, beer, and sometimes other stuff. With me this week is Sean. He is the authority on Michigan craft beer and also the survivor of a Bitterstone Brewing skid mark. Sean, how are you doing today?
I was really wondering how you're going to fit that in the conversation because you gave me a heads up that you were going to use it, but I wasn't quite sure how you were going to use it.
And have me not use it.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, the stone skid mark of bitterness. I survived.
Yeah, were you as thrilled with it as you sounded? Actually, you didn't. You sounded like you did like that beer. It didn't sound like you were put off by it.
Yeah, no, it's nice. It's a nice change of pace because I think so many times I've really started to fall into the category of beer that is called an IPA that just tastes like juice. You know, they're like starting to go.
Yeah.
I mentioned it on one of my tweets. Like fruited sours are now basically just like fruit flavored beer. Like that's what that is. They're not really sour anymore. They're not even aiming to be sour. It's just, let's get as fruity as we can get. And that's great. I mean, I don't have a problem with that, but
I want a beer called Let's Get Fruity.
Yeah. I mean, if it's going to be sour, make it sour. I mean, I guess it is a little sour, but they just try and pack all that fruit in there, and that's fine. If that's what gets people to drink beer and craft beer, gravitate towards craft beer, I'm okay with that.
What have you been catching up on, or what have you been watching this week?
You know, I think I blew my load. I I blew my load last week. I watched so much stuff. I've been kind of like not into watching anything lately and been doing work, not necessarily not real work, but like hobby work. The one thing I caught the next episode of was that Under the Banner of Heaven, that show I mentioned last week with Andrew Garfield about the Mormons and the murder and all that. That's really the only thing I caught up on. I did watch the first episode of the newest Kids in the Hall. That's on Amazon.
There's a new Kids in the Hall?
Yeah, it's like a 2021 or 2022 Kids in the Hall reboot kind of thing with all the original cast on Amazon Prime. So they have the season. I don't know how many episodes it's going to be or how many episodes are out. I know it has at least 2. And I think they said on the 30th or 31st of the month, they're going to release like a documentary about Kids in the Hall on Amazon Prime as well. So I'm looking forward to watching that. But other than that, I've just been watching a bunch of garbage or sleeping.
I had no idea that was sleeping's good. I had no idea that was a thing, a 2021 version of Kids in the Hall. To the point where I'm checking it now because I'm not sure I believed you.
No, it's a real thing. They have full frontal male nudity in the first episode.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, 60-year-old men dong flopping around. So be prepared for that.
We got plenty of that today, but we'll get to that in a moment. Before we go over our topic for the week, I did finish the Pam and Tommy series. You know, it's a series about Pam and Tommy making a sex tape, and you know, Tommy Lee seems like Tommy Lee in it, and Pam. You actually kind of buy her as a sympathetic person. Like, I don't want to call her a character because it's supposedly based off a true story, but I can buy why you should have some sympathy for her. It is kind of funny watching them go through to the Barbed Wire premiere because I remember that movie and it was not good. Wouldn't be surprised if we end up talking about that movie at some point just because of what it is.
There was a lot of anticipation for that movie when it was coming out.
I remember that, and it made, I mean, she was, you know, I was a kid when she was really I was only probably, so this takes place between 95 and 96, something like that. So I would have been 12, 13 through most of this movie. But I remember her being the biggest star on the planet for a while there, or at least it seemed like it.
Yeah, top of the world, definitely, for about a good probably 12 months or so.
Yeah, well, at least.
Yeah.
And yeah, she certainly didn't, she flamed out a lot harder than she came to fame, for sure.
They did Barbed Wire, and then that was Stan Lee's thing, right? Barbed Wire, and didn't they do like a vamp?
Is that a Stan Lee thing?
I thought it was. They didn't do a Vampirella thing with her, did they?
I don't think so.
Okay.
She did some show called VIP, which was like a cop Charlie's Angels type thing, but just her. I don't really remember much else that she's been in that's like an actual film, I guess.
Bruno.
She's in I didn't see Bruno.
Maybe. I think it's Bruno. I think she's in Bruno. One of those.
Yeah, I didn't see that one.
Sacha Baron Cohen movies.
Yeah, I've watched the Borat movies. I don't really like him much past Borat for some reason. So I will say though that for that show, Andrew Dice Clay plays a mob guy in it, and he's great as a mob guy. I don't know that I buy him as a tough guy, but as a mob guy, he fits the bill pretty well.
Are we talking VIP
And,
still or barbed wire?
We're talking Pam and Tommy still.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Totally different subject.
We were talking last week that, Nick Offerman and Seth Rogen are in it, and it was Seth Rogen through the whole movie. Like, he doesn't really change much, but I would totally pay whatever premium channel wants me to pay for a full-on fictional story of Nick Offerman's drugged-up, porn-peddling character just high out of his gourd being debaucherous for 8 episodes. I would pay to watch that. You only get it for like a total of probably 2 hours of the whole runtime of this show, but he's by far as horrible as a person that he is in the show, he's by far the best part of the show, which probably isn't that surprising.
Well, it's been a while since we've had a Nick Offerman kind of lead in a comedy series. I know he does that Making It show on NBC, but nothing like really comedic outside of that.
He hasn't really done, it seemed like he's done a whole lot since Parks and Rec went off the air. I mean, I'm sure he's in a bunch of things, but as far as like memorable things, nothing really sticks out to me.
Yeah, same. Like, not really a whole lot. I see him in like bit parts here and there, like cameos, but I can't think of anything that he's been in that he was like a title person.
I gotta think he's on that path where, kind of like Bruce Campbell does or Kevin Smith does, where he could probably make a living just by being Nick Offerman at this point.
Oh yeah, I'm sure he's got plenty of money.
Right. The other thing I've been watching a lot, so I ditched my cable service and I got a TV antenna, and I don't know what the hell channel this is that I've been watching, but they've had the Munsters on like all weekend, and I spent probably a good broken 2-3 hours just watching old reruns of the Munsters.
You say it as if there's new episodes of the Munsters that you could be watching instead of the reruns.
There's a new movie of the Munsters coming out very soon.
I heard about that.
Which is going to be, well, I won't go too far into that, but I don't know how the fuck Rob Zombie's going to make. One, why the fuck is Rob Zombie making a Munsters movie? Two, I heard the runtime is clocking in around 3 hours. Like, what, are you going to try to cram every, like, Munsters plotline into one movie?
It'll be like one long season, just as a movie.
Yeah. I don't really like Rob Zombie projects to begin with, so my expectations are pretty low.
Yeah, I know what channel you're talking about, though. It's like a HD channel. It's like a sister station to ABC, NBC, CBS. Like,
yeah, it's like 4.7 or 7. It's got a point at the end of it. But like I said, I fell on it on Friday night, and I just left it there most of the weekend.
Yeah, you can catch like Knight Rider and Airwolf and stuff like that on there, I think. Old, like 80s syndicated shows.
They were advertising Frasier a lot, so I'm assuming that you can watch Frasier on there at some point. So, polar opposite of Frasier, though, is the movie X, which is what we're talking about today.
I think it's somewhat similar, isn't it? Got some similarities.
There's a few. This is currently the 16th ranked movie on IMDb, so well out of our normal territory for where we're looking at movies. This is an A24 and Ty West movie. Ty West is the director. A24 is a production company, which right there alone, before we get into anything else, I feel like divides the room when it comes to movies like this. I don't know if you have an opinion there.
Well, I feel A24 movies just seem like they're a little bit more of a, I think they like to think of themselves. And I think for a majority of it, they do this. But I think they like to think of themselves as being kind of cerebral, thought-provoking kinds of movies.
Yeah.
And I was looking up Ty West. The only thing I saw on his IMDb that he's done that I would recognize is he did a segment in that horror anthology VHS. That's the only thing I saw on his resume that I would be like, oh, even as an actor or anything, there wasn't really anything that I recognized.
Yeah, he had a couple that the titles sounded familiar, but I don't think I could say that I saw him. Like, I'm pulling it back up now just to be sure. But House of the Devil, I remember hearing something about that when it came out, but I don't think I ever saw it. We're just going to go ahead and say it now. If you haven't seen this movie, mostly because I don't really care if we spoil it, we're going to let you know that we're going to spoil it. This is a pretty, like, simple plotted movie. Like, there's turns in it and there are surprises in it, but the core plot of this movie isn't anything overly thought-provoking, in my opinion. Am I going on a limb there?
No, I remember when we talked about it last week, I thought that it kind of captured I thought it was going for, I didn't know if it captured this or not, I thought it was going for a Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of vibe. And the part that I had seen was just a really early sample of them driving in the van that happens at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of got that idea. But as I watched this, I got, I mean, maybe a tiny bit of it, some of the plot stuff.
I would say the first, 20 minutes or so really does feel a lot like Texas Chainsaw, like to the point where the house that they show up at, there's a scene where they're looking down this like stairwell, and I actually paused it for a second. I'm like, this isn't the Texas Chainsaw house, is it? Like, actually, it was like, this looks eerily familiar. And maybe it's just how houses are in Texas. Maybe that's why. That's actually something I would say that is to this film's credit. Like, one of the things this film really gets right is it does. So, the premise of this movie is that you have a group of actors and a director, a crew that are going to shoot a porno movie, and they show up at a old farmhouse, and somewhere along the lines they get slashed into my porno. Is the basic plot of it. It's set in 1979, and that's actually one thing I would say that it's a selling point of this movie. They did a really good job of making you feel like this was set in 1979. The music cues are right. The look of the film is right. You don't ever see like a wayward, I don't know, 2022 Ford Bronco like pulling up the highway or something like that in this, or like songs from last year sprinkled in for some reason. So they do a good job in theming everything and pulling it in right. The casting, they actually, I think they got the casting like dead on this as far as what you could do. How I feel about the movie is a different thing, but I actually liked every character in this movie. You know, this is a movie that stars Mia Goth, who plays two roles in the movie. And I think she, for what they want her to do, I think she pretty much nails both. This has Kid Cudi in this as the strong male lead, we'll call him. Would that be the best way to put it?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, there's two kind of strong male leads, but I think he's more of the front runner between the two.
Yeah. He's the one that you get that full frontal that you were referring to several times throughout the movie.
Yeah, but I feel like it's definitely a prosthetic.
Oh, yeah, it is. So I saw some interview where they were saying that, but he's good in this movie. Like, each one of these characters is not only likable, but they don't fall into the traditional horror movie trope of someone being so fucking stupid that you're okay with whenever they die because they're so stupid and annoying.
Yeah, you're almost looking forward to when one of them dies, but in this movie, there's not really... Nobody's super... I mean, they're not great, but they're not super shitty either.
Most of them seem reasonable,
right.
if nothing else.
Yeah,
like you can understand their motives. You can get where they're coming from as humans for the most part. You got a couple. Jenna Ortega's in this. I was talking to you about her yesterday. That she's quickly becoming my favorite actress of this generation. If you haven't seen her in this, probably saw her in the new Scream movie or Studio 666. She's been popping up in horror movies left and right, and she's kind of quickly becoming the next Scream queen for this decade, I would say, which I'm okay with.
I want to kind of just jump in there. Like, I remember watching, my kids watch Stuck in the Middle, which is like a Disney teen kind of vehicle, and she was the lead in that show. Not that there's anything wrong with it. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I would love to see her branch out of just doing straight horror and see what she can do outside of that. I think she's got a real kind of knack for acting. I mean, she's been doing it for a long time now, so I'd kind of like to see her jump out of it. It is what it is so far. That's what she's getting cast as. Maybe it's trying to go against type too, a little bit.
She's pretty young too. Again, she's only 20 years old as of the time of this recording, so it's not like, I mean, how many movies can you do in that time frame, I guess. And I actually think this movie, more so than Scream, or likely more so than Studio 666, I got a feeling this one will probably put her name out there more than the other ones did, just because it's got more of like an art house type feel to it in comparison to some of those other ones. But yeah, I mean, I like I said, for what this movie is, the cast kind of gets everything right. My favorite character in this movie isn't even a human. My favorite character is probably the alligator. Yes? No?
I don't have an opinion either way. I have one of my notes is about the alligator, but it's not, I don't know. It's not the acting ability of the alligator.
Well, I feel like I'm kind of skating around the story of this movie. Do you have anything you want to add to that before we go too far into it?
No, the only thing I'd add in is, like you said, it takes place in 79. I feel like they do an awesome job at capturing a 70s vibe. The way that the characters dress, the hairstyles, like you said, there's no like shot where a 2000s or, late model Dodge Charger like drives through a scene or anything. All the vehicles are fairly accurate or pretty accurate. The decor and everything. So it's 79. So with most decades, it takes still a couple years in. Like, it doesn't really feel like it's the 80s until it's like 82, right? With this movie, it feels dead set 1970s. It doesn't feel like a 80s vibe at all. Late 70s, it feels straight up like, mid 70s, which I got to give them a props for making it feel, that accurate to the time. But yeah, other than that, I have nitpicky stuff, but it doesn't have to do with nothing to do with the ability of the actors or the story so much, just kind of nitpicky technical kind of things. Actually, I do have one complaint about a scene that happens later, but we'll get to it.
Did you have anything that you liked about this movie, other than what we just said?
There's nothing I disliked. I just kind of felt it was something to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I would go as far as to say there's small clips of things that I liked in this movie. I just mentioned the alligator, and there is a really, really cool, like, I'm assuming it was shot with a drone, of Mia Goth's character sitting in, like, a pond or a lake.
Yeah, like a lagoon or something.
Yeah, and basically you see this alligator just closing in on her from across the pond, and we're led to believe that she just barely gets out of this lake before she gets, eaten. Kind of oddly, I'm not an alligator expert, but like as soon as she's out of the water, the alligator is just totally vanished, like just out of sight, out of mind. So with how big this thing is, I feel like she would have noticed something in the water, so even after she got out, but I don't know. And the alligator comes back later to have one of the more memorable death scenes in the movie as people start getting kind of off one by one. So I guess I'm going to kind of tie in dislikes with this movie and like things that did get kind of back and forth with it, because I don't think you can talk about one without the other. My biggest problem with this movie is that it's just, for me, it wasn't really all that fun to watch. Like, I watched it twice, and I really didn't like watching it the second time, more so than I didn't like watching it the first time. I know there's such a thing as a film that sets out to make the audience uncomfortable, and I'm pretty sure that's what this was going for. That's all fine and good. There's a place for that, but it doesn't really sell to it. Basically, the premise of this, and maybe I misread it both times, but the premise and the motive for these old couple to start offing everyone is that the old lady, who you see kind of salt and pepper throughout the trailer, I got the vibe that she's just sexually frustrated. Her husband can no longer have sex with her because he's got a heart condition or something like that.
Yeah.
So I get the impression that there is a prequel coming out to this movie, which I guess we can come back to later. But I get the impression that what they're kind of moving towards with this is that Pearl and Maxine are one and the same. That they're essentially the same character, one way or another. That's not really directly spelled out in this, but it's kind of hinted at. So you see Pearl start kind of creeping on Maxine throughout the movie. She basically makes a pass at her, and it doesn't work. After that, she makes a pass at RJ, which is the stagehand for this, who's really dead set on making a classy porno.
Yeah, artsy.
Everyone can watch
an art film in the French style.
She makes a pass at him, and it doesn't work, and that's basically after he doesn't accept her advance. It's all downhill, and really at that point, the movie kind of goes from like the last half. That's where the third act kicks off, and the third act is really like maybe 20 minutes of this movie. Like once people start getting dead, they get dead pretty quick, like in fast succession. I'm fine with the whole okay, we got a bunch of young people here and we're gonna off them one by one. That part that doesn't really bother me, but the whole I'm old and I can't get laid, so I'm gonna kill all these young people thing. It was like, yeah, okay, I'm not really crazy about this, but all right. And it's not that I didn't feel real, because it almost felt more believable than a lot of these movies did.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't enjoyable.
Yeah, it's kind of like this lady's sexually frustrated. Her husband can't give it to her, so you get the feeling as the movie goes on, or at least I kind of got the feeling that this isn't the first time. Like this is
oh no,
they lure people in here.
They know it's not. You know it's not, because the cellar has another body in it.
That's and it's not RJ.
It's not RJ, and actually, when I saw it the first time, because they only show the body in the cellar for a brief moment on screen, I thought it was Jackson, or Kid Cootie's character, in some weird flashback thing or something, because they show him again right after that.
Yeah.
But I mean, it turns out it's just some other random body in the basement. So yeah, it's certainly not the first time that they've killed someone. Whether or not it's the first time they've killed a whole bunch of people is another question. So
yeah, and I also feel that RJ's trying to make this, as we mentioned, this classy art house kind of porno, And I think it really kind of parallels the director Ty West is trying to make this classy art style horror film. We have
Yeah.
the scene that really I was kind of like, this is, I don't know, I didn't like it, and it really kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Is there's a scene where I think it's Kid Cudi picks up a guitar and he starts playing a song. I forgot what song it is. It's, a popular 70s song, but he starts playing it, and obviously it's his cover. It's like a Fleetwood Mac song or something, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Some
I know what you're
classic
talking
rock
about.
song.
I know the scene. I don't know the song.
And they go like to this scene where they cut in between. There's like a split screen, and they'll show like Maxine, and they'll show Pearl, and they'll show some of the younger characters, and they'll like they'll switch back and forth with Pearl and how she's like depressed or laying in a room or whatever, wishes she would, wistfully wishes she would have done cool stuff when she was a kid. Basically, she wasn't stuck with this guy who can't get hard and whatever. It just like, it felt like the old 80s
he
trope.
He can get hard. It just gives him a heart attack. So.
Right. It just gets him dead. It feels like the old trope of like 80s movies where they stitch in a music video. Like they have a band that's going to play, and they make a basic montage music video of the whole thing. It's like, we're over this. This doesn't have to be, it feels pretentious to me. It doesn't feel authentic. It feels like you're trying to make it classier than it is.
It is kind of off-putting though, because like I said, aside from that scene, I feel like this movie goes away from a lot of what you would expect from horror movie tropes. The final girl isn't an idiot. She flat out like she kills her attacker. Well, yeah, she does kill in this. So there's a definitive end to this old couple and their ways of whatever they're doing. There's no like what's her name? Brittany Snow, I think is her name.
Mm-hmm.
The blonde. She's by far supposed to be the Hollywood blonde, like the one that you would think in any other movie, like she's gonna be gone in the first like 5 minutes of whenever shit starts happening. And she does get hers. Like she's the one that gets eaten by the alligator, so she absolutely does get hers. But even with that, there's no point where you really look at her and think she's making a stupid decision. She's like running, instead of going into the running car, she's running into the wood chipper or whatever. Yeah. Something like that. Like she still is a rational, reasonable human. You might not like her because she does porn, but she still has like a logical thought process with what she's doing.
Yeah.
And these, the way they lure these, I'm going to call them kids because I don't know what else to call them. The way they lure everyone out of this house, they do it under the guise of them trying to help this old couple. Kikuti goes out there because the old man comes out with a shotgun saying, "Have you seen my wife?" She gets confused, and he goes and helps him try to look for his wife through the swamp.
Yeah, once a Marine, always a Marine.
Right. Brittany Snow, her character goes out there, if I remember right, looking for Jackson, her kind of boyfriend in this, or whatever he is. They say, but they kind of say...
Yeah, they're kind of like friends with benefits.
Right. So everyone who is lured out of the home is lured... I don't know if noble is the right reason, but they're lured out for a reasonable thought process. They're not thinking, oh, there's this old couple that's killing us off one by one.
Yeah, it's all honest. It's all honestly done. They're doing it in the name of... Again, I don't know. I think noble might be pushing it a little bit, but they're trying to do the right thing.
Right. They're trying to be human.
Right.
They're not trying to be pricks about it. Which I don't know if that makes it better or worse. Like, that's not really the reason why this movie didn't sit right with me. I think the reason it didn't sit right with me is it's just, the moments of humor are very few and far between. Like, I found the alligator scene when Brittany Snow gets hers kind of funny just because it's like, at some point once you see that alligator from above, you're like, well, that's going to come back at some point.
Yeah, I think I didn't really like that scene because it was so telegraphed. Oh, really? An alligator? I mean, haven't we seen this before? But they set it up so far in advance that, like you said, you just know something's going to happen with that.
Right. And maybe it's because it's so off from how the rest of the movie is. Maybe that's why I was like, oh, that's kind of satisfying. At least you got to see this crazy alligator scene. The only other scene that I really laughed at is near the end when so Maxine is coming out and she's got we know that it's an unloaded gun. Apparently she doesn't know it's an unloaded gun. She's got a gun pointed at Pearl and they're having this little standoff and she goes to pull the trigger, it doesn't go off, and Pearl picks up a 12-gauge shotgun She pulls the trigger. It is loaded, and she is just catapulted out the fucking door. Which it's one of the few scenes that it's like I do believe that a shotgun would knock her on her ass. I don't believe that it would pull her straight back at a 90 degree or 180-degree angle and go through a door to that extent.
Yeah, it's almost as if they had a race car she was connected to the trailer
Yeah.
hitch and a bungee cord, and it just like
Right.
whipped her through this door. And that's how she like gets mortally injured, is because she gets blasted through the through the door because of the
I think
shotgun.
she says her hip's broken or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah, she gets hers, and then, she gets hers a second time over. But those are really the only 2 points in this movie that I found like a real moment to laugh at. Even before they start getting off, I didn't really find anything too humorous in this movie.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of. I mean, I think they try to, because the movie does cover the filming of this porno as well. So there's some sex scenes in it, and there's some witty banter back and forth. But yeah, I don't think there's anything really super humorous. I know that Jenna Ortega gets caught in the basement, and when she busts through the door and she's trying to unlock the door, and she gets her hand basically hammered. And I
Yeah.
was like, that was like an oh shit kind of moment. Like that looked really real. That was like how,
Yeah. She sold it really well.
Yes.
They've used the scream from that scene on. I've seen several posters where that's the poster, which is kind of impressive because she's really not. As far as like if you were to rank these characters, she's probably like number 4 or 5 in terms of maybe probably 4. Like she's probably one step ahead of RJ.
Yeah, I think her turn in the movie is what sets everything in motion. But yeah, I would.
Right.
She's not up until she's like the linchpin basically that holds the whole thing together. Yeah. And when she goes off the rails, we'll leave a little bit to the imagination. But when she does her little deal, that's when the third act really starts and everything starts to spiral out of control.
That scene. I mean, again, there's good effects in this movie too. Like some of the gore that is in it. It's not an overly gory movie, really. But when you do get some gore in it, it's pretty well done. I would say it looks good for this era movie.
Yeah, I think it's pretty realistic. I mean, I'm not a person that checks out Pain Olympics or any kind of stuff like that, but it's it seems pretty well done. I mean, it's believable.
Yeah. So like I said, the problem, like again, it just goes back to the same thing. This is just not a really watchable movie. It's not enjoyable to sit down and watch.
Yeah, I was very when we talked last week, and I said, well, you could just go read the Wikipedia and kind of sponge up whatever you can get out of it, and then we can talk about it from there. I kind of feel bad that you watched it again. It's not an awful movie, it's not like the worst movie I've ever seen, believe me, by far. But it was just kind of I was waiting for it to be over, watching the whole thing. Like, okay, how's this going to end, and when is it done? And I'm glad it was a short runtime.
Yeah, well, that's true. From a technical perspective, I think and I can see why people are so geeked about this movie. And I can see I think from a filmmaking standpoint, I think it's a well-made film. Like I think they did a lot of things really well, just not the story. So I do also, you kind of hit on it at the beginning. I can see where the Texas Chainsaw Massacre comparisons come from. Like I get it. I don't know that I would go that far, much past. I think I said the first 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, I think you said 20, but yeah.
Yeah, it's something like that. I don't think I would try to sell someone on this movie based off that comparison, though.
No, there's not enough. It's got the creepy old people factor. It's got kind of, I don't know. It does build suspense. I didn't see any
cannibalism.
Yeah, no, none of that. No furniture made out of bones or lampshades or anything. But
amateurs.
Yeah, it does capture. It is suspenseful. I mean, it does. There are times when you're like, okay, what's going to happen? And that's the thing I was going to ask you about. What did you think? There are a few jump scares, and I get the impression you're not like a massive jump scare fan. So what did you think of when those popped up?
I didn't really get. I know where they were trying to do that. They didn't really work on me in this one. I guess you could say one would be when Jenna Ortega's character finally gets out of the cellar and she goes running out the door and she just gets straight side shotted with a shotgun.
Oh yeah.
That's one where that kind of sticks out. It didn't make me jump though. I can't really think of a spot where I jumped in this one. And again, I watched this twice. I don't really remember a big jump. I think they tried to have the alligator be a jump scare, but again, you knew that alligator was coming back as soon as they got down by the swamp again.
There's a scene, it's in the daylight, and I think it's Mia Goth when she comes back from the water, and she's kind of looking to see where where Pearl is, or she's looking for something, and I don't
Oh, and
know.
she like pops up out of nowhere.
Well, the character, her husband, kind of jumps from off the side of the screen and grabs her,
Yeah.
or whatever. I can't remember what his name is right now for some reason, but that was a bit of a that got me, but it was unexpected, I think, because they built all that tension with the alligator coming up, coming, and she gets out of the water, and then it's just miraculously gone. But
His
so
name's
they
Howard.
yeah, and
Howard.
her husband's name is Howard. So then the alligator comes up. It builds that tension there, so it's really good. And then he like kind of just surprises her, but also at the same time surprises the audience. Being me, I'm not a huge fan of jump scares, but if they're done, and I thought that was done pretty well. But I
Yeah.
generally don't super enjoy them, especially this one. This movie did not do it, but there are sometimes when you see a movie and that's all they have is that jump scare,
Yeah.
and then you're like, come on, can we move
Well,
on from
and
this?
so many of them aren't even really scares. Like the ones that I can't stand is, especially if you see a movie in the theater where it's not really a scare, it's a sensory overload where
Mm-hmm.
they just dim the lights and they cut the sound down real low, and then all of a sudden they crank it up to 11 and start flashing something at you. You're not jumping because you're scared. You're jumping because you're like, "Fuck, turn that down."
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you're startled more than you're scared
Right.
by the
Right.
combination of all the, like you said, sensory overload rather than the thing that's
Yeah.
going on specifically on screen.
But yeah, I'm not a big like jump scares. Again, there's a few that I can think of where they've been done really well. The bigger problem with me with jump scares is you only get that once, maybe
Yeah.
twice watching. So a movie that really relies on that. We talked about it last week with Friday the 13th. I think that original ending would have been a great jump scare to go out on.
Yeah.
Now it doesn't. Now it doesn't work. I've seen it so many times, but outside of that, like I can't think of that's like the perfect spot to use it in that type of movie. I can't think of a whole lot of other examples off the top of my head, including in this movie where it's really relevant.
Yeah, I think the thing with this movie is that when I watch these movies, I take notes, and like I said, we've gone over kind of my formula. It's the I like, I hate, the meh category. And the thing with this movie is there just wasn't a lot of things. There weren't a lot of things in any category. Like the things I talked about
Yeah,
earlier when I said the things that I didn't like were technical things. There were a couple shots where, me being somebody that edits quite a lot of video and knows to look for certain things when certain effects are applied. Like there's these stabilization parts. I think it's when Mia Goth actually leaves to go to the water. It's just stuff that happens, like the background's really wobbly, and I know it's not on purpose.
yeah.
That just kind of caught me off. It's like, could you do more than one
That gave
shot?
me that gave me like a real grindhouse, like they were trying to pull from Grindhouse.
I don't
Especially
know
in
if
Planet.
that was intentional. It doesn't feel like it was because it was so subtle.
Probably not. Mostly because from what I do know of Ty West, I get the impression, but I can't borrow from Robert Rodriguez. I'm way better I'm more elevated of a filmmaker than he is. Because I
Oh.
can make a film for a lot of money.
Yeah, I just felt it was more of a lazy thing. Like we got it in one shot. We're good. Let's move on. And maybe maybe it was a time constraint, but time
Well,
constraint.
they shot this during COVID too, didn't they?
I would assume they would have had to.
Yeah. So if that might have had something to do with it too. But one of the things I did dislike about this, I noticed the second time I watched it, and this is really just where we're at right now. I was pissed when I saw the gas was 65 cents a gallon.
I didn't even notice that was not something I noticed at all.
I didn't the first time I watched it. The second time when they pull into the gas station, like a real like close up shot of it. I'm like, oh, you sons of bitches. But that's just because it's a horrible time to buy gas. So,
Yeah. And the other thing they rely on this movie is kind of a little bit of they don't really push it too much, but there's scenes with a preacher on TV, and you find out later there's a link. You find there's a link to it, and the religious overtone or whatever that's going on in this movie is kind of it. I feel like it's only there to progress into the, like you're talking, the prequel, but it really doesn't have much to do with the story. I mean, maybe it gives you some motivation as to why some characters are the way they are, but other than that, it just kind of feels like it's wedged in there to give you the impression that there's something going on that there really isn't.
so the first time I watched it, I didn't even know about the whole post credit scene in the trailer that's supposed to be on there. my thought with it is, well, this feels like Texas in 1979, and having a preacher going on TV about this type of thing feels, well, I've never been to Texas at all, but for whatever reason, that kind of preacher going on with that kind of sermon being blasted, kind of bookending this movie, just feels like it kind of fits for the setting that they were going to. Knowing that, so, the copy of the movie that I watched didn't have the post credit scene, so I don't even know for sure what it is at this point, other than that it's a trailer for the prequel, which is apparently already shot. You're probably right. It's probably linking the two movies more so and bring, like, I hate that I'm going to watch the prequel now just to try to figure out the bigger picture of this story. But that's kind of what they want, right? So.
Yeah. I thought the makeup in this too, because we go back and we're talking about a prequel, the Pearl, played again by Mia Goth, and her husband's name again, which I can't remember his name. The makeup at first I thought was really well done, but then the longer scenes, what was it? Okay, her husband Wayne. The longer the scenes kind of linger on these people, the more the makeup starts to become a little bit more, I don't know, less believable.
Her blue eyeliner or eyeshadow or whatever it is, her eye makeup, it annoyed the shit out of me in this movie, and I'm sure it annoyed me for what they were going for with it. It made her look like too childish, which I think is what the intent was, considering what they were doing in the movie. But it looked just tacky as shit.
Yeah, I kind of felt it was more of like trying to be more period specific. I don't think too many people wear blue eyeshadow now, but I think that would even leach into the 80s a little bit. But I could see your point of making her, trying to make her look a little younger than what she was. I mean, Mia Goth's in like her 30s or something, right? And she looks like she's not a day over 21.
And I don't know how old she's supposed to be in this movie. Like, they never really say how, like, give you an idea of, like, they're adults, but you don't know if they're supposed to be young 20. I guess they're porn actresses, so you would assume young 20s, but you don't really have a real idea of it. Like, if she's supposed to be like a 30-something actress and this is her, like, last breath trying to make it, that might explain that more, but there's no, like, point anywhere in the movie where they go into that kind of depth of character.
Yeah, the only thing I could think of that might give you an idea of how old she is, and I know that we kind of gave spoilers, but I don't want to give a total spoiler to the end, post escape, when they're talking about one of the characters at the end with the TV. You know what I'm talking about? Did you see that at the end when she's driving away? They're like, and so my blah 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 blah. I don't even want to. Yeah.
You're talking about the preacher?
Yeah, they show the picture on TV, and I think he kind of alludes to an age. I don't know why I just skirted all around that. It should be fairly obvious. The way I don't want to give it away. I don't want to totally give it away, because I feel like if you're going to watch this movie, you're going to watch it anyways, and I would like to leave something up to the imagination. But at the same time, I feel like I think that kind of does give an impression of her age, but I'm not 100. I didn't study it or anything.
Past that, I mean, I don't really have a whole lot. I know we didn't say a whole ton about this movie, but I don't feel like this movie gives a whole lot to kind of add to. This probably isn't our most, like, exciting episode because of it, but I really don't feel like I have a whole ton to say with it other than, kind of give a final, like, recap on it. Do you have anything you want to add to it as far as, like, anything I'm missing here point-wise?
No, I mean, I think we kind of covered it because, like you said, and I think we both said it, it's not anything, it's not like it's bad. It's not a bad movie. It's just not something I'd want to watch again. Like, I feel like I've seen it, and that's good enough for me. Like, there's not really anything that jumps out that makes it really any different. Like I said, A24 tries to make itself, or they like to present themselves as being, like, again, cerebral or art house kind of movies, and this is neither one of those. I mean, I feel like they're attempting to be kind of an arty horror film, but it just feels like it feels fine, but it feels slightly pretentious with all the stuff that goes on.
Yeah, and to be honest, like, I didn't even, like, just going off the trailer, I didn't feel a huge, like, desire to watch this.
Mm-hmm.
Really, the biggest reason why I watched it before we decided to do an episode on it was just because it was available to watch.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen it. So
I felt like it was kind of hyped, a little hyped, as being like the next big thing.
Definitely, Well, I've heard people. It's definitely horror community wise being hyped up to a point that I just like. I've heard people say this is the best slasher movie they've seen in the last 30 years, and I can't oblige that. So I'm not. I even calling this a slasher movie almost feels generous because I feel like with there's no like set rule with this, but I feel like with a slasher movie, it's almost got to be a little stupid, a little like slapsticky to a point. Like it's got that era of this is dumb and this is violent and horrible, but it's also kind of stupid and funny at the same time.
Yeah, there's a little bit of humor to it, a little bit of
Right.
it doesn't take itself too seriously, and I feel like this movie definitely takes itself seriously.
At the end of the day, I mean, this is one, if we're using the Dewey Hot Dog Pod Monster rating scale, whatever we're doing, I'd probably give this about 6 hot dogs out of 12 porno movies.
Yeah, I would probably give it more like 5.
Yeah.
But if something's really bad, I'm very much of the opinion of something's average, it's a 5. So put that in there, so it's not like, oh, Sean really hated this movie. I didn't. If I didn't like it, I'd give it a 2. But it just feels average. It doesn't feel like they do really anything special or anything different. I think, like I said, it just kind of feels it's just there.
I agree with you. The reason why I put it just over that 50% point is the things I do think they did well, which again, the cinematography, the look of the film, the sound design, the effects, all that type of stuff. From a filmmaking standpoint, forget. I guess the story is a big part of filmmaking, but we'll just ignore that part for a minute. So why not? From a filmmaking standpoint, there's a lot of things here that you could say that's good. Like there's a lot of things to like from that aspect. It's just getting to the point where you actually want to sit down and watch it. That's especially more than once. That's a problem. And I'm willing to admit that this is probably one of those movies too that I think we're probably going to be in the minority here, like both of us are. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the like episode where someone decides to call our leave us a message and tell us about how stupid we are because we don't appreciate elevated horror or whatever we're calling it these days, and we would like to hear you do that. So,
sure. I think it's pretty to look at. It's just not interesting.
Yeah.
Technically, it's done really well. I think they did a really great job. I think some of the gore effects are really good. Like I said, it looks realistic. They were true to the period, but it's just not interesting. I didn't find it interesting.
If you were to try to resell this movie to me, like let's just erase my memory and say, John, you should watch this. The only real reason you could tell me that I should watch this right now, Jenna Ortega. I'd watch a movie for her with it again because I've enjoyed her movies so far. But past that, I can't give you another reason why I would say you should watch it.
Well, I feel it's really interesting that we both think it's pretty well acted. It looks great. Mm-hmm. The performances that were turned in were great. It's just a weak story, and it was just again not memorable, not interesting. I will within a couple months. I won't remember that I'll remember I've seen it, but I won't remember much about it besides.
Yeah.
When I look back on it, it's just one I won't want to watch again.
And that's pretty much where I'm at with it. And there's a handful of like really admired horror movies that kind of fall in that category. And this one for me, it's not my cup of tea. But that's okay. We don't have to love every movie.
Yep.
We don't have to go on forever on every movie. So this might be a little bit shorter of an episode. Oh, well,
we'll get you next time.
Yeah, we'll find something to babble about next time.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
You got anything you want to add before we wrap this one up?
No, I think the summary of the movie for me, like I said, looks pretty, not interesting.
Well, in the meantime, like I said, we're going to wrap this one up for the week. Make sure to follow us on all the socials. We're at Dewey Pod Monster. If you can like us, review us, leave us comments on any podcasting platform, be it Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, Google, wherever you listen to this. If you could rate us and leave us a comment, we would appreciate it. As I mentioned, if you go to our actual page, which is anchor.fm/DeweyPodMonster, there is an option there to leave us a message. If you want to give us feedback or just let us know how we're doing, which I guess would be considered feedback, you can absolutely do that. If you want, we can also include it in an upcoming episode of the Dewey Pod Monster. Sean has other stuff going on. Sean, why don't you go ahead and plug your plugs?
Yeah, you can find me at youtube.drafttherapy.com or drafttherapy.com. I mostly do Michigan beer reviews. I do some out of the state, recently, John and I got a chance to record a couple episodes of our Michigan mandatory brewery videos. We checked out Drafting Table in Wixom, Michigan, and Ascension Brewing Company in Novi, so those should be up fairly soon. By the time you hear this, they'll probably both be up. And yeah, that's where you can find me. Social media is all under Draft Therapy.
All right. Well, in the meantime, thanks for checking us out. Again, the other thing you do that always help us, share this podcast. We would appreciate it. But we look forward to talking to you next week about something else and probably having a little bit more fun with the topic that doesn't involve this movie. Have a great week.